I got divorced. In the year after the 7-year itch. At the Candlelight dinner celebrating our 8th wedding anniversary, he couldn't wait and brought up divorce. I calmly looked at his face, the light was dim, his expression unclear, and all I heard was a sigh of relief from him. I took a minute to recall the past, from our meeting to marriage, the years gone by, up to today. A minute was enough to make a decision. I said, okay. When do we go handle the paperwork? We had no children, no tangled property disputes, he bought the marital home, so I'd just move out. As for the rest, it didn't matter. He was stunned for a while, then asked, aren't you going to ask why? I chuckled lightly, why? It was nothing more than a new love, or an inability to accept that I refused to have children, or simply falling out of love. Yes, in the first year of marriage, at a family gathering where my in-laws pressured me to have kids, I said in front of all the relatives, Dink, no kids. That day, my in-laws were very angry, and he probably felt quite humiliated as well. After that, they rarely came to our little home. Divorce, what reason could there be besides the other party's fault? It couldn't possibly be that he was terminally ill. I didn't answer. I downed the glass of red wine in one go and said, next Tuesday, then. I'm free on Tuesday. Before he could respond, I put on my coat and left. Let him pay for this meal. I hailed a cab and went home. On the way home, I watched the neon lights flicker along the street, the bustling crowd gradually thinning until the neon was almost gone. Yeah, I'm home. More precisely, to this home that only has 4 days left. I quite liked this little villa, nestled among mountains and water, lush and green, just half an hour's drive from the city center. The door opened, and the housekeeper thoughtfully brought me some slippers. I smiled at her but didn't take them. I walked barefoot from the first floor to the bedroom on the 2nd floor, took off my coat, and went into the bathroom to freshen up. The alcohol was hitting me, dizzy and flushed. I stepped into the walk-in closet. The pajamas hanging in the wardrobe were all lace, not my style, but his. I closed the wardrobe door, grabbed a cotton camisole, and lay down on the bed. I closed my eyes and thought back over the years. He was very busy. He had a family conglomerate going through a critical period, lasting about 3 years. We could only see each other once or twice a month, and our WeChat conversations were just a message or two every few weeks. Thinking further back to the early years, right after we got married, we traveled all over the world, domestically and abroad, non-stop, with endless conversations. Before we got married, I can hardly recall what those times were like. My eyelids grew heavier and heavier until finally, I fell into a deep sleep. Waking up again, I felt a heavy weight on me and heard rapid breathing by my ear. I smelled a strong scent of alcohol. Opening my eyes, it was him. He was half on top of me, one hand stroking my shoulder, whispering something softly in my ear. The smell of alcohol made me uncomfortable. I pushed him away, and with a thud, he fell to the floor. I got up to check. His eyes were closed, mumbling incoherently, then he turned over and fell asleep? I was too lazy to care anymore, pulled the blanket over me, and closed my eyes. After a while, I heard a rustling sound. I opened my eyes. He had lifted the blanket and was holding me. I was a bit annoyed and pushed him. He got angry and said, "You're my wife. I want you to hold me." "No, push me away." His speech was slow and a bit disjointed, but the meaning was clear. The hot breath, heavy with the smell of alcohol, blew across my face. He kissed my lips, and I let out a few sobs. He stopped, looked up at me with a dazed expression. He said, "You are my wife." A flurry of kisses fell again. I closed my eyes, thinking, what is this? A final frenzy before the divorce? Alright, ending this marriage with one last act of love is better than tearing each other apart and turning it into a life-or-death battle. I leaned in to kiss his lips, then pushed him away, finally gaining my freedom. I was gasping for breath, sweat covering my body. The last time we were this close was about 2 months ago. I turned my face to look at him, the moonlight streamed in, just illuminating his face. He was curled under the blanket, one hand under the pillow, already fast asleep. 8 years passed in the blink of an eye, and we never made it to the finish line. I gently stroked the furrowed brow between his eyes, the reason for the divorce. I had seen that woman before, her short, neat hair, bright eyes, and perfect teeth. Her eyes were large, and when she smiled, she had a pair of beautiful dimples. At that time, he was also smiling, with such a carefree grin, warm and radiant. She was his first love, the one who left this city, his first love of 9 years, who had now returned. The return of a first love, hastily divorcing to marry her, sounds like a melodramatic and cliched story, yet this was reality. I scoffed, I had my pride. I wouldn't ask, never would I ask. I got up, took a shower, and went to the guest room. After a night of peaceful sleep, when I woke up, the housekeeper told me he had already left. I made a phone call, and soon, a dozen or so domestic workers in uniform arrived. Under the aunt's astonished gaze, I packed all my personal clothes, shoes, bags, and some small furniture I had bought. Like the large Italian floor vase in the living room, the custom ceramic dog in the study, the cute little night lamp on the bedroom bedside, and even a few small wooden carvings I brought back from a trip to Yunnan. I also had the curtains changed back to the brown set that was there before I moved in. I did my best to restore everything to its original state. At dusk, the house finally felt less cramped. It turned out I had been the one filling it up so much. There was no trace of me left. I looked at the relatively empty house and breathed a sigh of relief. I placed the wedding ring on the desk. I told the aunt to remind him not to forget to go to the Civil Affairs Bureau next Tuesday. Auntie was tearful, and I didn't understand why she was so upset. I returned to my own apartment, a spacious flat in the city. I hadn't unpacked the small furniture I brought back from the villa, I just cleared out a room and piled everything there. This place was much livelier than the villa. Just across the street was a large shopping mall. On weekends, the mall was crowded. I changed into a white long dress, didn't put on any makeup, and hurriedly darted from one store to another. I ended up spending quite a bit of money in one go. That first night back in my own place, I couldn't sleep. I opened my phone and scrolled through WeChat, then my contacts, only to realize that aside from my parents and brother, I had no friends left. Suddenly, I remembered the time before my marriage. The year I graduated with my master's degree, I returned to the country. To welcome me back, my parents arranged a family banquet at a 5-star hotel. I went to the restroom, and as I stepped out of the private room and turned the corner, I bumped into him holding a glass of red wine. He was a bit drunk, and I was walking a little fast, so the entire glass of red wine spilled all over me. I have a bad temper, and that outfit was the first time I wore it. I grabbed his collar and punched him once. My brother seemed to sense something and came out to stop me just as I was about to throw a second punch. He said he knew this guy, he was his friend. Later, my brother's business required him to stay in another city for a while, and with nothing else to do, I went along. At the dinner table, I saw him for the second time. That day he wasn't drunk and even apologized to me. He said he had dirted my clothes and was willing to be my boxing sparring partner. I agreed. I stayed in that city for a month, and he was my sparring partner for a month, probably got punched for a whole month. My brother couldn't stand it. He said that person was the heir to a famous conglomerate and also his friend, so he told me to be careful. After hearing my brother's words, I didn't go to the boxing gym anymore. He came looking for me again and asked why I hadn't gone back. I said that with his prestigious status, it would be too humiliating for him to have me as a sparring partner. He laughed. He said then we could try other ways, like going on dates, shopping at the mall, having meals together, or traveling. Maybe it was the beautiful sunset that day, or perhaps his smile just seemed especially charming. I agreed once more. 3 months later, my brother's work wrapped up, and he was going back, but I agreed to his request and chose to stay. My brother said that being love-struck would only lead to trouble sooner or later, but I stubbornly argued that it wasn't certain who would lose out. 4 months later, he proposed, and I said yes. Both our parents were delighted, it was a perfect match. The wedding was grand, and I fully settled in this city. The night the wedding ended, I saw him staring blankly at his phone. I asked him what was wrong, and he said a childhood friend of his hadn't come to the wedding, and he felt a bit sad. It turned out many things had signs long ago, but I just didn't pay attention at the time. Who would feel sad at their wedding because a good friend didn't show up? And that friend was a beautiful girl. I got out of bed, unwilling to think about it anymore. It's all in the past, I told myself. I opened the wardrobe, cut all those lace nightgowns to pieces, and threw them into the trash. Then I fell asleep peacefully. By 9 a.m. on Tuesday, I had already been waiting at the Civil Affairs Bureau for half an hour. I was a little angry, he was the one asking for the divorce, so why was he making me wait so long? His lawyer arrived in a hurry, saying he couldn't come in person due to some matters. He brought a power of attorney, all the paperwork was complete, and soon the marriage certificate was turned into a divorce certificate. I didn't get angry anymore. To not even come in person to divorce the girl he was chasing after, his sincerity was quite clear. He sent me a WeChat message, saying he hoped I would always be happy, safe, and healthy. I smiled, safe and healthy, what a cliché blessing. I didn't reply, I blocked him on WeChat and on my phone. Who says you can still be friends after a divorce? Then let's just be strangers from now on. Autumn in this city is short, I barely wore my trench coat before I had to bundle up in thick sweaters. I'd been slacking off in my own apartment for 2 months. When my brother found out, he came to confront me. Yes, I hadn't told anyone about the divorce. The marriage was sudden, and so was the divorce. They should get used to it, they'll find out eventually. When I saw my brother, I smiled, after 2 months, I finally saw someone familiar. My brother took me out for a big meal. He started to say something several times but stopped himself. I knew he was about to lecture me again. I wouldn't give him the chance. I said, who says I'm the one who lost out? I wouldn't admit it, and I never would. I whispered something into my brother's ear, and he was stunned. Another week passed, and I told him I wanted to stay in Yunnan for a while. He immediately arranged everything for me. It was a sunny little courtyard full of flowers and plants, with a storefront where I could open a small shop. The air here was fresh, the flowers fragrant, the sky blue, the clouds white, the water clear, and even the fish swam freely. Mom had abandoned Dad and had also settled into my little courtyard. I opened a coffee shop, though I didn't know the first thing about it. My brother found me a barista and a waitress. The barista was handsome, a sunny young man in his early 20s, fresh out of college, confused about life, and coaxed by my brother into becoming a barista. The waitress was a 19-year-old local girl with fair skin and 2 braided pigtails, always smiling at everyone she met. The cafe started running smoothly, because the coffee was good and the waitress was chatty, the customers gradually increased. Besides occasionally collecting money and listening to the customers tell their own stories, I don't manage or interfere with anything else. No matter how busy my brother is, he makes sure to visit me at least once a month, bringing me delicious treats and fun things, and taking me for a stroll in the city. Dad is too busy. When Mom was still around to hold down the company, Dad was known as a hands-off CEO in name only. Now that Mom is on a long leave, Dad has asked my brother several times if he could come stay with me too, but my brother has refused each time. Mom often drags me out to accompany her when she goes grocery shopping or cooks. Actually, she just wants company, I don't know how to do any of it. 3 or 4 meals a day, Mom keeps making different dishes for me, and I've gained quite a bit of weight. The baristas and waitresses all praise Mom's cooking as delicious, which makes her very happy. She urges me to be happier too. I smiled but said nothing. Am I sad? After the divorce, I never thought about him once. How could I be sad? I didn't even shed a single tear. Where was the sadness in me? They all had an unspoken understanding and never mentioned that person. It felt as if I had returned to 8 years ago, back to the days before I met him. Time moved slowly, yet also quickly. By my count, I had been in this little courtyard for 2 years. Dad was so exhausted he fell ill, Mom had to go back, and my brother, worried about me, insisted I return with him. The courtyard was entrusted to the barista and the waitress girl. I told them I would come back and not to miss me too much. Dad's illness required surgery, so I returned to the city I lived in before going to Yunnan. That city had top-tier medical resources, and Dad's surgery went smoothly. After he was discharged, the whole family moved into a spacious apartment in the city center. Returning here, I felt very out of place. The neon lights at night were blinding, and the noise from the surrounding malls was irritating. I started having insomnia again. Dad needed to recuperate here for a while and had to go to the hospital regularly for checkups. My brother went back to the company, so I could finally show some value as a daughter. I went to the hospital to pick up Dad after his checkup. In the waiting area, the doctor came out with Dad. A plain car pulled up ahead, and a man got out from the driver's seat. He opened the trunk, took out a wheelchair, then opened the back door to help an elderly woman into the wheelchair. The man was very thin, and the elderly woman was bony and lifeless. Just a resemblance, I thought. How could he be driving such an ordinary car? And how could his usually wealthy mother be sitting in a wheelchair? I didn't look any further, took Dad, and went home. Hateful night, hateful neon lights. I replaced the living room curtains with thick blackout ones, and pulling them shut made everything feel much better. Mama, the chubby little baby, holding on to the edge of the sofa, took step after step toward his father. Dad squatted down cheerfully, sitting on the floor to play with the baby. Yes, the baby is mine, a boy. Giving birth to him was not easy. I was considered an older mother and nearly died on the operating table. My initial decision to be child-free wasn't without reason. The little boy already recognizes people, drooling as he sees me and no longer wanting grandpa. Mama, mama, he called, crawling over. The boy is plump and still smells of milk. Holding him, the night didn't seem quite so hateful anymore. Insomnia, I've been suffering from it lately. Seeing the dark circles under my eyes, my mother helplessly urged me to eat more and then try to get some sleep. At the dinner table, Dad sighed, "That old woman is done for, evil begets evil." Mom glared fiercely at Dad, and he immediately fell silent, turning his attention to the baby. For some reason, a scene I had seen at the hospital flashed through my mind. Mom looked strange and glanced at me several times. I knew they were hiding something from me, so I asked, "Mom, just tell me what's going on." She sighed and said that the mother of that man was hospitalized and close to death, my former mother-in-law. I just said oh and didn't comment. Dad took over, asking if we should go see her. After all, we were once married. Mom squeezed Dad's arm hard and said there was nothing to see. Who in the world would constantly push their son to divorce his wife and even have a mistress ready? Such a person dying is just karma. I was a bit taken aback. Was he talking about his mother, my former mother-in-law? We'd been married for 8 years. Although my ex-mother-in-law didn't like me much because I chose to be child-free, she had never once told me to divorce her son. I pressed my mom for more details, and she told me everything she knew. It turned out that the ex-mother-in-law had been trying to get us to divorce for a long time. She even arranged multiple dinners with that first love of his, and my brother had caught them. I just said oh and didn't say anything else. That's fine. Finally, her wish came true. Now she has the daughter-in-law she prefers. I lay back down, put on some music, and closed my eyes to try to sleep a little longer. But that thin, gaunt figure kept flickering in my mind. He was thin, very thin. I opened my eyes and scoffed at myself. Thin or fat, what does it matter? I'm thin too. The sun was blazing. I stood at the hospital entrance, staring at the words inpatient department for a long time. I didn't even know why I had come here on a whim. Maybe it was because that thin silhouette had been flickering in front of my eyes all night, making me restless. Or maybe I wanted to see something else, like the scene of his first love with him together. Perhaps then that damned silhouette wouldn't keep appearing. It was easy to find out which room my ex-mother-in-law was in, it was a regular two-person ward. Inside, she had a tracheal tube and her face was obscured. My ex-father-in-law sat outside in the corridor, looking utterly dejected. I didn't greet him and walked straight into the ward. The nurse told me the family members had gone to talk to the doctor and that they would remove the tube soon. I nodded without saying a word. I looked at my former mother-in-law's withered hand and remembered that on our wedding day, the hand that held mine was still soft and fair. I leaned close to her ear and whispered a sentence. A tear slowly trickled down from one of her eyes. The caregiver said she must have heard what I said. I left the hospital room and ran into my first love. She was wearing sunglasses and carrying a fruit basket. I pretended not to recognize her and walked straight ahead, but she turned around and called out to me, then chased after me. The moment she spoke, she called me shameless for still lingering in front of my ex-husband after the divorce. I held back the urge to hit her. She grew more agitated, even taking off her glasses and throwing the fruit basket aside. Then she started pushing me hysterically. I silently raised a hand, but the moment it was about to land on my first love's face, I stopped. If I hit her, people would just think I still cared about him. I don't care. I asked the nurse to call security. I wanted to leave. The security guard arrived, and so did he. He was not only thinner but looked much more worn down. The moment my first love saw him, tears rolled down her cheeks. She grabbed his arm and said I had scolded her, hit her, and torn apart their love, that I was the other woman. I laughed in disbelief. A crowd gathered, pointing fingers at me. I walked up to my first love, raised my right hand, and struck her hard across the face. She staggered and fell to the ground, her face instantly flushed red, and there was a trace of blood at the corner of her mouth. The entire place fell silent. I had trained in boxing for years. That blow was enough to leave her ears ringing and her head dizzy for a while. I rubbed my hand with satisfaction and told my first love, this is what it really feels like to be hit. Then I turned to the nurse and said to have the doctor check her out, I would cover the medical expenses. My first love got up and rushed over, trying to pull my hair. He followed closely behind, half embracing me as we walked outside. The smell of tobacco on him was strong and choking. He pushed me along for quite a distance until we were out of sight of the crowd, all the way to the main gate. He let go of me, his expression a bit awkward. He didn't say anything, just looked at me. I was a little surprised. Shouldn't he be protecting his first love? Maybe he was just worried I'd hit his first love again if I stayed there. I asked if there was anything else, and if not, I'd leave first. He asked why I came here, and I said I was just passing by. He didn't say anything more, and I turned to leave. I knew he kept watching me until I got in the car, and even in the rearview mirror, I saw him still standing there. That night, not only did that slender figure keep flickering in my mind, but that weathered man did too, endlessly. I regretted it. I shouldn't have gone. A few mornings later, after Dad finished practicing Tai Chi, he came up to me and said there was someone downstairs who had been waiting since 4 o'clock, and asked me to go see who it was. I went downstairs and saw a familiar figure. It was him. As I approached, he was smoking, with several cigarette butts on the ground. He threw away the half-smoked cigarette in his hand, looking a bit unsure of where to put his hands. I asked him what was going on. He said his mother had been laid to rest, the funeral was over, and thanked me for visiting her that day. I told him it was just a casual visit, nothing to worry about. After a moment of silence, he asked me about something the caregiver overheard, me saying something like the child is a boy to his mother, and wanted to know what that meant. My heart skipped a beat. I hadn't expected the caregiver to overhear. That day, I told his mother that I had given birth to his child, a boy who looked just like him, to put her at ease. After some thought, I told him I had a 6-month-old son, but it was just casual talk with his mother and had nothing to do with him. He fell silent, looked at me with a stiff expression, a mix of anger and red-rimmed eyes. I adjusted my clothes and turned to leave. He didn't follow, just stood there for a long, long time. Divorced now, it's best to cut off all those pointless ties. For our son's second birthday, despite my and my mother's objections, Dad insisted on throwing a grand party at a five-star hotel. He invited many relatives and friends, as well as some business partners. For a child's birthday, there were nearly 20 tables. I felt helpless. Mom kept shaking her head, and my brother kept comforting her, saying that Dad was just too happy. He wasn't there for the full moon or the first birthday, so this time he wanted to make up for it. Our son was very cooperative. Dad held him and happily wandered around the room. He smiled at everyone he saw, happy no matter who held him. I quietly left the hall and went to a corner of the hotel corridor to get some fresh air. It was night again, and those annoying neon lights. Since coming back, I've been a little confused about whether I hate the night itself or just the neon lights. I kind of miss Yunnan, miss that little courtyard, that small coffee shop. Two brightly dressed women nearby were holding champagne, animatedly gossiping. Their voices were very clear, I heard everything. 2 years ago, he sold all his shares in the group for money and was kicked out of the company. His father, my former father-in-law, secretly invested in foreign exchange and went bankrupt, losing everything. Then he went gambling and racked up huge debts. I walked over and joined their conversation. I asked, "What's his situation now?" The two of them said he sold all his assets and had paid off most of his gambling debts. Broke and destitute, with nothing left, almost all his relatives and friends had abandoned him, even his wife had left. I laughed. If even his wife left, what about that first love? The two said his first love would never marry him. If she were going to marry him, it would have happened more than 10 years ago. More than 10 years ago, he was madly in love with that first love, but she left without looking back and went abroad. She only came back a few years ago. I heard she regretted it, but regret was useless, he had already fallen into such ruin. How could her parents possibly agree to let their daughter marry him? It felt like I was listening to someone else's story, and when it ended, I couldn't help but sigh. What a pair of childhood sweethearts who never got to be together, and what a man who went bankrupt and had his wife run off. I hope his reason for wanting a divorce has nothing to do with either of those. I jogged forward, leaving the corridor, leaving the hotel, leaving the neon lights behind. I ran faster and faster, gasping for breath, suddenly not knowing where to go. I didn't know where to find him. In a panic, I opened my phone, WeChat deleted, calls deleted. I couldn't find him anymore. My vision blurred, and I touched my cheek, wet all over. Why was I crying? What right did he have to make me cry for him? I crouched on the ground, not knowing exactly where I was, not knowing where he was. I sobbed uncontrollably. I didn't want to cry, I really didn't want to cry. After crying enough, I called my brother, and he came to pick me up. The car was very quiet. I confirmed his situation with my brother, who said it was all true. My brother only found out about the divorce when he learned that all his assets had been seized by the court. He said that although he felt sorry for him at the time, he was still relieved that I wasn't dragged into it. I asked my brother to take me to his place. He drove me into a residential complex. The streetlights were dim, and the surroundings were all construction sites. There was a small 2-story courtyard, that's where he was renting now. Dilapidated, desolate, beyond those 2 words, I couldn't think of any others to describe it. I told my brother to wait in the car while I walked alone toward the courtyard. I heard a man's voice and a woman's voice. The man was telling the woman to leave and never come back. The woman was begging him not to lie to her anymore, asking him to admit that he had always loved her. The man said that after he got drunk that one time and was punched by a woman, he finally woke up. Since then, the only woman he had loved was the one who hit him, always, never changed. The woman said she didn't believe him, she had already turned back, so why hadn't he? The man said the past was the past, and there was no turning back. The woman ran out and drove away, it was his first love. I walked over and called his name. He stopped in his tracks and turned around. I didn't say anything, I just cried, sobbing like a child, gasping for breath. He held me without a word, gently stroking my back, telling me not to cry. When I had cried enough, His shirt was soaked with my tears and snot. I told him I came to ask why he wanted a divorce. He smiled and said, "It's been so long since the divorce, don't ask anymore." I asked if it was because of that first love. He shook his head. I asked if he had ever done anything behind my back with that first love during our marriage. He shook his head again, saying he only had dinner with her twice, both times arranged by his mother. I asked if the friend he regretted not coming to the wedding was that first love. He shook his head once more, saying that was a good friend of many years who had some trouble back home and went abroad, promising to come back for the wedding. I smiled. He smiled too. I took his hand and got into my brother's car. My brother drove us home. When Mom saw him, she pulled Dad back into the room. My brother also made an excuse and left. In the living room, it was just him, me, and that chubby little boy. The little boy was drooling as he played, holding onto the chair and table legs as he made his way to him, tugging at his pants and looking up at him. He crouched down, and the boy giggled and smiled at him. Their faces, their eyebrows and eyes, were strikingly similar. His eyes reddened, he hugged the little boy tightly and kissed him fervently. Then he held me close and kissed my forehead. The airport was still crowded in the winter, and the little boy was bundled up tightly, looking like a little ball. I was going to the small courtyard in Yunnan with Mom and Dad. There was still an hour before boarding. Mom and Dad went ahead to security, while my brother stayed with me and my son in the hall. I was waiting for him. He said he would come to see us off. He came running, out of breath, but finally arrived. He hugged me and our son, saying that once he sorted out some matters, he would come to Yunnan to see us in 2 months. I nodded and told him that this son could eat a lot, and now that he had a son to support, he should accept his brother's help instead of struggling alone. He was silent for a moment, then finally nodded. When he came to Yunnan, it was already 6 months later. He had broken his promise. What was supposed to be 2 months turned into half a year. However, he had finally paid off his debts and settled his father's affairs. Now, he was free. Not long after, the little courtyard's coffee shop started serving simple meals again, with Mom as the chef. Business at the coffee shop grew better and better. During the day, he helped attend to customers, and at night, when his brother was free, they discussed some investment matters together. I had custom clothes made for everyone at the coffee shop, and he wore his too, a tie-dye blue printed shirt with a denim apron over it. He earnestly introduced the nearby attractions to the cafe's guests. Our son ran around, constantly causing mischief, but he didn't get annoyed. Instead, he smiled, a bright smile just like that day under the sunset. Winter passed, and spring arrived. There is no winter in Yunnan, it's always spring. I bought a bunch of colorful lights, and at night the little courtyard transformed into a sea of neon. Today is my birthday. I took his hand and pulled him into the corner of the courtyard. I gave him a box, and he gave me one in return. He opened the box I gave him, revealing a men's ring, while the identical one was on my hand. I opened the box he gave me, and it was the diamond ring, the one he had given me when he proposed. We both smiled.